Great. Thank you for bringing that on up. Like I said, we're here to talk about the Prescribed Fire Plan and doing our outreach. If you can go into the next slide. So we'll go through already did some of our introductions and purpose, but we'll go into a little bit more details. We'll also talk about our current actions that Midpen is going through right now and the Prescribed Fire Planning portion. And then we'll go over what that plan overview sort of looks like. And then finally, we'll open it up to how to become involved in the program development and how to comment on our program. Next slide. So as a general overview, Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space, we got started, created in 1972 as a grassroots voter initiative. And we expanded quite quickly. And now we have 26 preserves in Santa Clara, San Mateo, and Santa Cruz County with about 65,000 acres that we have helped to protect. Of those 65,000 acres, we also have about 245 miles of trails and approximately 180 employees with about 1,000 volunteers. So we have some great help to help manage these lands. The preserves are open free and open to the public all year long. We also have a 7-member elected board of directors, and we actually have a few of them that are on tonight with us that are listening on in. We have both Director Karen Holman, and we also have Director Kurt Riffle with us. So I want to say thank you for joining us and listening in to our Prescribed Fire talk tonight. Next slide. So the purpose of this meeting is to really to inform and solicit a discussion with the public about our Prescribed Fire Plan. This is pretty early in our process, and it's really a time for people to hear and to discuss with us about what's going on and any comments, questions, or concerns they might have about the use of prescribed fire. Next. So talk about some of our work as we are doing it now. So we do maintain existing fuel breaks in our open space preserves. We also provide defensible space clearing around about 117 Midpen-owned structures. We have 47 landing zones throughout the Santa Cruz Mountains, and these landing zones are used pretty frequently for any emergencies that might be going on. So I know that a number of our landing zones have been used for accidents, both vehicle and bicycle accidents. And so we can have a helicopter land and take someone down to a hospital for quick evacuation. So these are used pretty extensively throughout our areas. We also maintain hundreds of miles of fire roads. And then we also manage about 8,000 acres of grasslands using conservation grazing. And that is in part to manage fuels. So we do have an integrated pest management program. It's called the IPMP. And it's about 500 acres of primarily manual and mechanical fires that we really focus around the vegetation around the WUI. You might hear that word a couple times tonight. That's the wildland urban interface, and around structures. So that was our original fire program that we have. And that was done in 2015 when we realized in 2017 that it just wasn't enough. So the 500 acres was really about maintenance of what we were already doing. And we realized that we had to quickly pivot and start to do more proactive management. So that was the development of our Wildland Fire Resiliency Program. Next slide. So the objectives for this program that we established is to manage vegetation, including invasive fire-prone trees, to establish healthy, resilient, fire-dependent or fire-adapted ecosystems. And really this was to further our mission, to protect and restore the diversity and integrity of ecological processes on Midpen lands, and to facilitate healthy post-fire recovery, also known as resiliency. Next slide. We also wanted to integrate Native American traditional ecological knowledge practices into natural resource management, particularly as they relate to prescribed fire, to promote ecological resiliency and enhance biodiversity. We want to manage vegetation infrastructure on our lands to reduce wildland fire risk, to improve wildland fire fighting capabilities and coordination, and to improve overall safety, to reduce the harmful effects of wildland fire on people, property, and the natural resources we have here. And then we also want to provide a framework to have an adaptive framework to periodically review and revise what we do in response to climate change, improve knowledge, improve technology, and the work that we're doing. This framework also considers competing Midpen priorities, capacity, funding, and sustainability, and partnerships. And these really help us to locate, scale, and time our vegetation management activities throughout the district. So the Wildland Fire Resiliency Program, like I said, was adopted last year in May of 2021. And really there was 4 different main plans that make up this program. The first one is the Vegetation Management Plan, which allows us to do manual and mechanical treatment of about 1,200 acres of new area, and then do maintenance of about 1,400 acres. Now, just a reminder that the IPM program only allowed up to 500 acres or so to be able to do this. So this is a dramatic increase in what we can do. The second one is the Prescribed Fire Plan, the PFP. But this was done at a very programmatic level, meaning that we looked at it from a higher viewpoint without getting into too many specifics. And when we developed the program, we did state that, hey, we're going to go ahead and do further development and look into more details of Prescribed Fire Plan. And that's what we're doing here tonight. The third is a wildland fire pre-plans or resource advisor maps. These are maps that we share with responding agencies. Midpen is not a fire agency. We're a land management agency. So really we're here to conserve the land, and but we do want to help and provide any support we can to those responding agencies such as CAL FIRE or Woodside Fire Protection. So these pre-plans and advisor maps really show what we have on our lands that could be of help or assistance to the responding agencies, such as where water might be available, where certain vehicles can be driven that are a certain size, where are our fire roads that are maintained, where are escape routes. So this is really just an advisory to those fire agencies. And then lastly, like I was talking about in the objectives about we want to be adaptive, we wanted to make sure we had a great monitoring plan. So we have this monitoring plan that both looks at the objectives of the program. Are we meeting our objectives? But also, which I think is just as important, is are we having an effect on the environment that is unintended or that we did not anticipate that we want to look at and be, or that may bring concern to us. So far, since May of 2021, we brought in a total of about $3.5 million in grant funding to implement this. And I believe that we're in the running for quite a large amount coming up in the next year or two as well. So we've already started doing a lot of this work under our vegetation management plan. Next slide. So with this, I'm going to hand this off to Jason, and he's going to take over and talk about the planning of what we've been doing.
Thank you, Cody. And as Cody had mentioned, on the previous plan, there was some high-level definition of what the program was going to be. A lot of what we're working on now is the details that are really going to define what activities and actions Midpen's going to take on to restart the Prescribed Fire Program again. Prescribed Fire Program is going to meet a wide range of goals, from fuels reduction, restoration, and preservation, really with the goal of obviously minimizing impacts on the environment. Next slide. It's important that to understand that when you see these prescribed fires out there, people aren't just out there going and lighting, staff aren't making some call to go. There's a really defined burn planning process that's done. So even after we finish this larger, it's a programmatic plan, every burn that's conducted for Midpen is actually completed under a separate prescribed burn plan and smoke management plan. And we'll have some more information on that in the breakout rooms. But those plans then are really prepared at the unit level. So this is the 10 to 100 acre unit level by a qualified burn boss, and then reviewed by another burn boss with local knowledge. It's really important to have someone, I know Phil that's here on the phone, who understands these ecosystems, fire in these ecosystems, preparing these plans, reviewing them, and then implementing them. So prescribed fire is a very important statewide tool to use, but its implementation is very localized. The prescribed firm plan also describes the types of resources that are going to be on the fire, and it really varies by the prescribed fire size, complexity, and vegetation types. But the types of roles that you see here, some or all, can be on different burns, ranging from pile burns to simple grassland burns to more complex, larger multi-day burns. Next slide. In terms of where to burn, Midpen has a huge ownership, and obviously it's all not going to be burned tomorrow. So there's a lot of work in defining some of the early units where those will be done, and then how to prioritize some of the larger landscapes and where to put fire in the landscape. Again, we mentioned the burn plan and smoke management plan. Those will be done for every single burn in the future. And these sort of this process continues to evolve over time, but there's established processes really by the National Wildfire Coordinating Group at CAL FIRE that we'll be using on a unit by unit level when we go to implement. In terms of implementation, there are several different types of burns, which we'll go over. The burn plans will also talk about the different methods of control, firing, and then mop up and rehabilitation. And all of this is subject to really a lot of Midpen's existing best management practices, basically how they do and protect things. So this is a program that's really integrated within their existing way of doing work on their different ownerships across their landscape. Next slide. So a lot of folks ask, where are you going to burn? Where are you going to start? And really it's a larger view, but some of the key points of burn planning is really to try and burn in continuous vegetation types. So, grassland or oak woodlands, and use areas that are bounded by existing trails, roads, and infrastructure. It reduces some of the complexity of the burn and decreases some of the new fire line construction that's needed. And then also at the larger picture, trying to integrate this prescribed fire program with other efforts that are happening in the region off Midpen lands. So there's a lot of fuels reduction work happening, a lot of other prescribed burning being planned, working to integrate that together so we're getting sort of the most bang for our buck with our burn windows is really important. In terms of prioritization, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I think things that people are going to be familiar with obviously is cultural and natural protection of culture and natural resources. The vegetation type, again, trying to work in uniform vegetation types. Does it have value for fuels reduction or mitigation for wildfire risk? And then really the potential for successful implementation. And it's really important to take on a complexity of burns that we can successfully plan and implement. Next slide. So I'm sure many folks on the call have been out on Midpen lands, and they have a very diverse vegetation, again, grasslands, redwoods, oak woodlands, shrublands. These pose some challenges because the landscape is so diverse, but some opportunities where a lot of these fuel types can be burned at different times of the year. So a lot of what we're going to be doing is looking at prescriptions that can cover a wide range of vegetation types over the safer times of year that they can be burned. Next slide. And in general, prescribed fire is a great tool, and I'd probably make this more of a Venn diagram. It can meet a lot of objectives at once, but really what we are working on is a primary objective for each burn. And so we're looking at ecosystem restoration, the reintroduction of fire, not necessarily just for fuels reduction is one primary objective. Training burns are really important to build up both Midpen's capacity as well as cooperating agencies' capacity to just work together on the ground, understanding each other's equipment, technology, communications, and fire culture. Traditional ecological knowledge burns, TEK burns, these would be done in collaboration with local tribes, but places where the tribes see the value in reduction of prescribed fire to protect or restore some of the resources that they're concerned with. Fuels reduction burns, which are pretty common to see, really reducing dead material before it burns in a wildfire. And then unplanned ignitions. We all know there's going to be a lightning event or something where you have multiple ignitions. And we're really trying to give Midpen the ability to help inform the incident management teams of where to start for fire suppression actions, especially when resources are limited, and maybe where to go direct resources as they become available. Next slide. The benefits of natural resources of fire are pretty well known. Almost every ecosystem in California evolved with fire over a long period of time. It can be used to reduce conifer encroachment in perennial meadows, protect perennial grasslands. Reintroduction of less severe fire. I live in a place of California that's burned millions of acres at high severity, and the forest is virtually gone in a lot of places. So being able to get fire on the ground under conditions that you want it to occur is a huge benefit versus having it happen at a time and a place that you don't want it to. And then improve forage productivity. Again, so many plants in California are designed and evolved just to regrow vigorously after fire. Next slide. And adding to that, you get what's been coined as pyrodiversity, some burned, unburned, and various severities of burn across the landscape can really increase landscape level diversity. And in general, like as Cody had said, we're just looking to facilitate resilience and sort of ecosystem processes. A lot of these systems are sort of frozen in time through about 100 years of fire exclusion that really affects their composition and function today. Next slide. And we'll have a separate section on monitoring, but as Cody mentioned, there's several methods available to monitor biodiversity, soils, erosion, water, fuel loads, fire severity, weather. Not necessarily every aspect will be monitored on every burn, but we'll definitely be looking at burn unit specific monitoring requirements, and that information is usually put in a burn plan. Next slide. So our general implementation strategy as we move past the planning stage is in the short term to look at really low complexity burns, simple burns, small, these can be half acre, 1 acre, 10 acres. And early on looking at training capacity and interagency cooperation with both our agencies and neighbors and landowners, neighboring landowners. Over time, and when I say over time, I say 3, 5 to 7 years, you're moving up to higher complexity burns in the 100 acre plus range. And maybe multi-day burns. And then eventually you'll be moving back over time to previously burned locations that you would burn for maintenance. Again, throughout this interagency coordination is critical. Midpen, wouldn't be doing this all on its own, but working with local fire departments, local landowners, and the communities that they're burning in and adjacent to. With that, I'll pass on to Panorama to cover the CEQA and CEQA approach.
Great, thanks, Jason. So the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, applied to the adoption of Midpen by Midpen's board of the Wildland Fire Resiliency Program. So the overall program, as Cody had described, was subject to CEQA. And CEQA is a law that requires the study of the environmental impacts of a project or a program in this case, and the mitigation of any potentially significant impacts that are discovered during that study process. And the CEQA process is really meant to allow for public input and feedback, and also to inform the decision makers when they're looking to either adopt or not adopt a program. So the Wildland Fire Resiliency Program, EIR, was certified, and the program was adopted by Midpen, as Cody said, in May of 2021. And the prescribed fire plan was analyzed within that EIR at a program level. Although you should keep in mind that as much information as possible was presented in that EIR in order to determine effects. So really thinking about what parts of prescribed fire can have biological effects or air quality effects, and that was identified. The analysis in the EIR addressed burning in different habitat types, such as mixed woodlands and shrublands and grassland. And it also provided a little bit of a quantitative analysis because we had parameterized it to up to 500 acres of prescribed burning per year. And the EIR also included a detailed analysis, as I'd mentioned, of other parameters such as soils and air quality emissions. So currently the prescribed fire plan is being developed in more detail, as Jason had identified, and that includes delineating the treatment units and defining the implementation scale and schedule, building off of the framework that's in the Wildland Fire Resiliency Program. And once the additional details are developed even further, Midpen is going to review the analysis in the EIR to see if there are any impacts that were not covered, or that may be more severe than was covered, or that the amount of burning per year fits within what was addressed, or if all the impacts in the description is within what was analyzed. We'll also look at that, and we'll determine the level of environmental review for the prescribed fire plan, which could range from anything from an addendum to the CEQA document to a tier DIR or a supplement for a subsequent EIR. Coordination with other agencies, partners such as CAL FIRE and stakeholders are going to continue through this plan development phase. And Midpen is aiming to have a more fleshed out draft of the PFP, the prescribed fire plan, in early fall with some meetings. And then in December, we anticipate either an addendum path or determination of an EIR path. And so here, turn it back over to Cody to talk about how you can comment and next steps.
Great, thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Jason, as well for those presentations. Before we open it up to our breakout rooms to go into some further details and answer any questions, I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to take down this email address. It's Midpen PFP comments at panoramaenv.com. So this is not your only opportunity to engage with Midpen and to talk about prescribed fire. We welcome all and any comments, questions, or concerns, either through this comment email address, or when we do go to any of our board meetings and or any committee meetings, there is also the opportunity at those to provide comments as well. With that, the one other thing that I just want to make sure everybody understands that Midpen, like I described earlier, we are not a fire agency. We're here as a conservation agency, a land management agency, and we are working in partnership with all the different fire agencies that we do have that share jurisdiction with us, which is quite a number. We've got 12. And so we are planning on, working with each one of those partners as we further go on. So at this point, we are going to go ahead and open up our rooms that are available for everybody. The idea here